Tranquility du Jour, January 28th, 2019. Looking for a tranquility reset? Trade in a week of winter for a week of sunshine, coconut water fresh from coconuts, amazing food, yoga, creativity, mindfulness, and self-care with me in beautiful Costa Rica. And this is happening over President's Day weekend. So those of you who are stateside and get that day off, you just need to take 4 days off for a 7-day vacation. You can learn more at KimberlyWilson.com/Costa Rica. Hello there, this is Kimberly Wilson and welcome to the 441st edition of Tranquility du Jour. Today we're chatting with repeat guest Christine Mason Miller and discussing her new book, The Meandering River of Unfathomable Joy. So we're going to chat about her adventures in India, her travel takeaways, and how India brought her closer to God. Now, one very fun thing, too, that I'm excited to share is if you will post a takeaway from this podcast over in the blog post, which can be found at KimberlyWilson.com/441. By Sunday, February 3rd, you'll be entered to win a copy of her book, a signed copy shipped to you from the lovely Christine. So be sure to head on over to the show notes and leave a takeaway after you've listened to this podcast. Now, one thing, too, that I want to say is a big thank you for tuning in to yesterday's podcast. I don't know if I've ever done 2 in a row, and it just worked out where with 440, I wanted to share a little bit about my 15-year journey with Tim. And as you may know, for those of you who listened to it, we went on and on and on. And it's funny, I even woke up today and was like, oh, I forgot to talk about this or that or mention, these various things. And, it's like, of course, you can never capture a 15-year relationship in an hour and 20-minute podcast. But I hope that was somewhat insightful into the challenges, the ways in which we strive to make things work with 4 pets in a tiny place, working together, et cetera, et cetera. So again, if you have any questions about that, or if you're like, oh, I wish you talked more about X, just drop us a note. You can send it to me, hello@KimberlyWilson.com, and we'll be sure to consider that for a future podcast. Now, for those of you who are new to Tranquility du Jour, there's a link in the show notes, which again are at KimberlyWilson.com/441, where you can find out more about Tranquility du Jour. And one new piece that I have done recently is the 5 tenets of Tranquility du Jour. So this new here page is going to get a facelift, an update shortly. And if there is anything that you would like me to add to it, please don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. Also, I'll be sending out a love note this week. So if you're not signed up for those, you can do that at KimberlyWilson.com/love notes. And the great thing about it is you're immediately rewarded with access to Tranquil Treasures, which is a bunch of MP3s, PDFs, videos that are filled with a variety of tranquility tools. Now, before we dive into hearing from the beautiful Christine again, who I was like, is this my most frequent guest on Tranquility du Jour? And it may be between her and Laura Vanderkam at this point, who's written a lot of books on time management. So anyway, I'm just delighted to have her back. And in the show notes, you'll also find links to our previous interviews over the years. So if you are interested in heading out to Costa Rica, we just had one more person sign up yesterday, which I'm just delighted about. It's someone who's been coming 4 years in a row. This is her 4th year. So absolutely delighted. We have 4 people there who have been coming for the past 4 years in a row. And it's a wonderful, wonderful journey to the tropics in chilly weather, at least in Washington, D.C., or out here in the East Coast and through the Midwest. And if you're interested, that is happening February 16th through the 23rd, and there are 2 spots left. And would love to have you with us. It's really a magical experience and just the perfect time of the year to escape. And then also mark your calendars for March 24th. That is our next Tranquility du Jour Live, which is a free event that happens seasonally, and that is happening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So whenever you sign up, you get a link to everything you'll need to join us for the event. Now, also, those of you who are local or somewhat close, we've had people come in from neighboring states for this event. On June 8th, I'm hosting Yoga and the Animals, which I believe is my 4th annual of doing this. And it's a yoga practice, a vegan meal, and a private tour of a sanctuary. This beautiful, sweet, sweet sanctuary in Ellicott City, Maryland. And it's only like an hour away from Washington, D.C. So if you're interested, available, this one usually gets sold out, and would love, love, love to have you. And there's a link in the show notes for your tickets to that. And that's from 10 to 2 on June 8th. And then finally, Tuscany calls. So that's June 13th through the 20th. And there are 8 spots left for that. And this is an amazing adventure at a private villa on a hilltop. And during this week together, we will be doing yoga every day. We'll be practicing mindfulness every day. And then we will also be dabbling in creative play. There's a swimming pool, and it's just this really lovely, just a very sweet adventure. And it also includes a day trip to Cinque Terre. And if you have not been to Cinque Terre or heard of it, Google it. It is amazing. It's considered one of the most beautiful places in the world. So again, that is July 13th through the 20th. And I believe it happens around the time that there's some really fancy, fun, big music festival there. And there's a link to that in the page about Italy at KimberlyWilson.com. And that can be found at KimberlyWilson.com/Italy. So I'd love to have you. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And again, I just want to say in closing, before we move into the interview, a big thank you for all of your support around Year of Tranquility. Please keep sharing photos. I love seeing you with your new book. And Christine was so sweet. I'll actually put the photo from her Instagram account where she held up and was showing off her book that she received last week. And I really, really appreciate your support. It sounds like this book is really resonating with a lot of you, and that means a lot. And it even made its way to Australia. We had Joyce, who held up a photo of her, or actually had a photo of her book. I believe it was with like tea and a candle. And I was like, oh, I want to be there. And so I just love seeing them. And you can share those with hashtag Year of Tranquility. And also keep in mind, if you are sharing your photos, hashtag Year of Tranquility, and or pinning a review on Amazon, then I'm going to be pulling every couple of weeks a name from people who've done reviews or shared photos, and offering you a free e-course. So a little incentive to do so, to take the time to pen a review or share a photo. And again, it really just means so much to me, because it's just nice to know it's in people's hands, and hopefully it's being utilized, and hopefully it's contributing to more tranquility in everyday life. And what's great too is it comes with these 4 bonuses. And as I was recording the workshop, it's a 1-hour workshop that I recorded last week and is now available for everyone who buys the book. And you can find out more information about that at KimberlyWilson/YOT. But anyway, as I was recording it, I had gone through and I'd filled out the book and was getting all ready for my year with it. I was like, wow, this is a really great tool. It was just so fun to play with. So be sure to set aside like an hour or 2 with some markers, some washi tape, a glue stick, scissors, and some collage materials. And, that's typically like tags or tickets or wrapping paper, or frankly, just images from magazines. That's what I tend to do for a lot of my collage materials. So anyway, thank you again for your support. It means so, so much. And there will be a link to Year of Tranquility in the show notes. Now, without further ado, the beautiful Christine Mason Miller. She's an author and artist who's been guiding others toward a meaningful life for more than 20 years. Her experience with writing, publishing, licensing, and teaching have established her as an experienced, compassionate authority on how to bring dreams to life, particularly those related to writing and publishing a book. Her online course, The Conscious Booksmith, has supported hundreds of aspiring authors on their book creation journey. She's the author, artist, and illustrator of 4 books, each one distinctive and unique in its topic, scope, and design. Her latest book, The Meandering River of Unfathomable Joy, Finding God and Gratitude in India, was just recently released. She's a graduate of Virginia Tech and the University of Georgia. Her career began in 1995 with the creation of an independent greeting card line called Swirly. Over the course of a decade, Swirly evolved into an internationally known brand with more than 1,200 retailers and clients that included Target, Barnes & Noble, Jo-Ann Fabrics, and the Girl Scouts of America. Swirly designs were licensed for a wide array of gift, stationery, and home decor items, and an illustrated gift book translated into 3 languages. After shifting her career efforts to original mixed media artwork, she organized and participated in over a dozen gallery shows and exhibits before launching her second gift and stationery line, the Christine Mason Miller Collection, in 2009. In addition to her latest book, she's the author of Moving Water, a memoir, and that is something, too, that we interviewed Miss Christine about. Ordinary Sparkly Moments, The Art of Finding Yourself, also interviewed Christine about. Desire to Inspire, Using Creative Passions to Transform the World, also interviewed Christine about. And Plant Your Dreams and the Miracles Will Grow. She's been a regular contributor to numerous print publications such as Bella Grace, Somerset Life, and Somerset Studio, and her essays have been featured in Skirt Magazine, Modern Creative Life, and Dharma Mamas. She has facilitated workshops and retreats at venues across the country, including Esalen Institute in Big Sur, was a speaker at the 2016 and 2018 Brave Girl Symposium, and was one of 10 artists featured in Indie Kindred, a documentary film by Jen Lee about artistic collaboration. She lives in Milwaukee, Wisconsin with her husband and their chocolate lab, Tilda, who is adorable. Welcome back, Christine.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me again.
It's always a treat to have you on the show, and big congrats on this beautiful new book, The Meandering River of Unfathomable Joy, Finding God and Gratitude in India.
Well, thank you. Yes, it just got released in early November, and I've been a shipping fiend ever since then. There's been a really great response to it. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, it's so beautiful. And, I remember following you and seeing all these gorgeous photos popping up on Instagram while you were there. And yeah, they're just so freaking colorful. India is so colorful. And what I wanted to start with is just some of the numbers that you listed in your book that I think is really interesting and might be interesting also to our listeners, that the population is 1.2 billion. It's the 7th largest country by area. I was surprised. I thought it was even bigger. It's amazing. The 2nd most populous country, which is crazy. I assume behind China, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
6th largest economy, 29 states, and 23 official languages. So interesting.
Yes, it is a fascinating place. My husband, who's such a numbers guy, he loves all of these different kind of comparisons. I think what he figured out is there are as many people in Delhi as there are in the entire state of California.
Isn't that amazing?
And it feels like it.
It does. It does. Yes. Yes. Listeners, because often, at least whenever I've been twice and you've been twice, you fly into Delhi, right? And you're like, oh, it's an immediate culture shock. And then also just such a, fascinating experience. So tell us a little bit why India? What drew you there? And what were your initial impressions? Because you went back.
Right. I've traveled a lot. I've traveled to a lot of different parts of the world. And for a long time, India felt too intimidating. I was scared I was going to get sick. I was just afraid of what I would see and things I had heard. And what, oh, I remember how it came about. Then I'd had to have been 2013. My husband had recently retired. We had just gone through this big transition of moving from Santa Monica to Santa Barbara and him being home all the time. That was a big switch. And I was just having a difficult time kind of figuring out my new routines and my new roles with him at home, and just having a little bit of personal angst. And so I started looking into all of these different trips, and I found one which was like a bicycling trip through Bangalore in India. And I thought, well, maybe that would be a good way for me to do it. I'd be with a group and it would be this adventure. And I invited my friend Barb to go, and she said she hated bicycling, but she would go to India with me. And then we were off and we decided to go. And so it was something that had been on my radar for a long time, but I felt intimidated. But then all of a sudden the right circumstances came into play, and I decided it was time to face my fears.
The one piece too about India, and listeners may already know this, but you have to get a visa. So it's not as smooth as just traveling to Europe, right? It's like, and I know other countries require a visa, but I just remember it being quite an ordeal. And, for me, I was going over to lead yoga retreats, but initially I wrote in like, why are you going yoga? And they were like, do not put that on your visa, remove that. And I thought that was really interesting. So, the visa process, at least here for me, was a bit of a journey. How was it for you?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, you want to make sure you fill out the forms properly. And that process went pretty well. It was also a lot of shots.
Right. Yes.
It's getting poked by a lot of needles and getting shot records updated, and planning for that trip was different from planning for any other trip. It was, making sure I just had certain kinds of like charcoal tablets in case I got sick, and other kinds of medical things that are not prescription, but like pharmaceutical things that I normally would not travel with. But I just knew I need to kind of go the extra mile to make sure I have what I need in case something goes a little bit haywire.
Great reminder about the shots. How did I forget those? Yes. And,
Right.
yeah. And, one person recommended to me, they were like, get the 10-year visa, because then you just don't have to go through all this paperwork, again, if you're going to go back, within the next decade. So I remember doing that. And that was a great little tip also.
Yeah, that's what I should have done the first time. But now the second time I did it, I did the 10 years. So
I
won't have to do that for a while.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the challenges of traveling in India, right? Because it's so funny. You're picked up at the airport, or you go, you fly in, and then you're picked up at the airport. Maybe you get into a taxi, or, and then you get on the street and you see, what do you see? All sorts of interesting things.
Yes. So first off, I just want to acknowledge that when Barb is the woman I went with 4 years ago, and she also was part of the group that I went with this year. We were kind of in a bubble, and we did that intentionally because we sat down and we said, okay, these are the things we're nervous about, and these are the things we don't want to have to worry about. So we worked with a travel agent who we had our own driver. We had guides in every city. I mean, it was just us. We weren't part of some big tour bus or anything, but we had a lot of those details handled because we knew ourselves well enough to know that that would probably freak us out. Like, I saw so many people there just kind of winging it, and I'm in awe of those people. I think I could probably do that now that I've been there a couple of times. But for these first two trips, I did not have enough confidence in myself to be able to figure out all of these details entirely on my own. But having said that, it's still, you're still in it, and you're still part of this dance that is India and is Delhi in particular, because that's where we flew into. It's kind of diving right into the deep end. I mean, there's just people and cars and motorcycles and rickshaws and cows and dogs and donkeys and horses. And it's just all of these things happening at once. And yet somehow it works. And somehow there's a flow to it. Even in traffic jams, people are moving and going places and getting things done. And you just become part of this flow, part of this river of humanity that's flowing in all different directions. And everyone's just trying to get done what they're trying to get done.
You're right. Somehow it works, And that's exactly whenever we got into the cab and we're like, oh my God, rickshaws. Like, I'd never seen a rickshaw. It was so exciting. But yeah, you're right. Oh my God, there's a donkey. It's like, there's all sorts of things. And yeah, traffic is pretty insane. And, and all the honking and just so much noise. It's a lot of stimuli. Exciting,
yes.
Especially because you've just come off a 17-hour flight, right? So you're a little wonky as it is.
Right. And I also want to talk just for a minute about like having our driver and our tour guides and all that. Like that sounds so super fancy, and it's actually not. There's a book called Shantaram, which is all about this one man's experience in India. And there's a passage in that book where he had hired a guide to take him around Mumbai, and there was one day when they're walking past this guy's hotel and he sees all these men hauling up these big, huge tubs of water. And he says, well, what are they doing? And his guide said, they're carrying up hot water for you for your showers. And the man's first thought was, oh my gosh, I need to stop taking hot showers because look at how hard they're having to work. And this tour guide was like, no. He's like, take more hot showers because you're giving them employment and jobs, and this is like it's just you meet people. What am I trying to say? Like, we weren't sitting like in the back of this fancy car. Like we were just sitting in a normal car and our driver's in the front seat and he's telling us all about the city. And, it's more, down to earth. And it's, even though it did put us in a little bit of a bubble to have our own driver and our tour guides and things like that, these weren't like these fancy people. I'm not explaining myself very well at all.
No, I get it, but right?
The point I'm trying to make is that this wasn't, we were not trying to insulate ourselves from the people and surroundings and the cities and everything's going on. Like having these people with us and showing us around actually enabled us to sink more deeply into it in a way that we wouldn't have been able to do if we were on our own. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
Like I wouldn't say one is better than the other. They're just different. And they both can provide an experience of India that is meaningful and it is down to earth and helps you get to know the people and the culture and the way people live.
Absolutely. It's way more authentic in a way, in the fact that, yeah, they're taking you places. And, because even our Delhi taxi driver, took us to this big, beautiful open market. Okay. We would never have found that on our own.
Exactly.
And so, yeah. No, I totally get what you're saying. And it is different, right? Than going to New York City and getting a private driver and, the whole shebang. Right. It's like, you're making a big contribution, I think, to the community and being able to get involved in the community.
Right. I always feel a little bit self-conscious saying we had our own driver and our own tour guides because it sounds so she, and it's really different over there. And it was great. And we had some of the same tour guides this year that we had in 2014.
Oh,
because
wow.
we worked with the same travel agent, and we're like, we hugged them. And it was amazing.
Now, one of the things you talk about is, feeling closer to God and having this connection. I mean, my goodness, it is in your subtitle, right? Finding God and Gratitude in India. So tell us a little bit about your experience with that, because I will say that is something that so many people feel with like going to RT, like everything there is a spiritual experience, and it's almost like you're enveloped in it. And so I'm curious for you how that came about.
It has to do with what we were talking about earlier about there are all of these people and creatures and sentient beings that are moving and living and trying to survive. And it seems overwhelming. And yet somehow, some way, everyone is being provided for. And it's not in a way that I think me as a Westerner, I can't fully wrap my head around that, but I see it. All I can tell you is that somehow people and creatures were being taken care of. And I just felt like God is living there. He is living amongst all of this. And you see it in the colors. You see it in all of the shrines and the beauty and the flowers, and in the way that someone has this little patch of cement or this little patch of walkway in front of their home or storefront, and they sweep it and they keep it spotless. And one of the rituals in the morning, the first roti they make, or I don't think it's roti, it's something else that they make in the morning for breakfast, but it's like a kind of flatbread. The first one that they make, it gets fed to a dog, and that's part of an offering. It's like all of these offerings and provisions and sacredness, they're woven into the daily life that, everywhere. So that's part of it.
And it's so interesting too. And I don't know if this was your experience, but I don't think I've ever seen happier people.
I know. I mean, it's really amazing to, we were three blondes and all four of us have blue eyes and we're obvious tourists, we're obvious Westerners, and people would stop and stare at us sometimes. But as soon as we'd smile, everyone just lit up. And people wanted to take pictures. They wanted to know where we were from. They wanted to invite us into their home for a meal. I mean, everywhere we went, just one smile after another, after another, after another, just always ready and available to have some kind of joyful exchange, even if it was only for 5 seconds.
Yeah, it is funny. I was going to ask you, and I assume, because you are stopped a lot for people to get photos with you. And it's like, oh my God, I'm a celebrity in India. Meanwhile, nobody knows me, right? Yeah.
I know. It's so funny.
So one of the pieces that you wrote in your introduction that I wanted to read that I thought was really beautiful, it says, in situations both mundane and extraordinary, India challenged me to be fully present, to surrender to each moment, and to take it all in. She encouraged me to pay attention to everything around me and to what was happening within me, guiding me toward prayer and stillness everywhere I went. And so to me, that really, I think it ties in everything you've just said about this sensation and feeling close to God, as everything there was like this experience that kind of drew you in from the senses and to really the state of reverence.
Yes. And not only that, but, so I got sick in 2014, and this was all respiratory. I never got sick in my stomach. And then that happened again in 2018. My attitude was, if I'm not sick in my stomach, I don't really care. So give me some cold pills and let's go. But being sick is being sick, and it creates discomfort. And so I'm not fully healthy. It's all this noise, it's all this craziness. But it's in those situations where I'm pushed so far out of my comfort zone like what I love about those situations, or what I appreciate about those situations, is the opportunity they provide for me to turn to prayer, to be the kind of person I say I want to be. You know, I talk a lot about living in the present and surrendering to what is, and being being in each moment. That's really easy to do when I'm home with my cup of tea and my dog by my side. It's not so easy to do when I'm on an airplane and I have sinus pain and I feel like there's a needle going in my eardrum. You know, but in that situation which I was in, all I could feel was gratitude, because I'm like, I'm safe on this plane. My friends are with me. Someone just handed me a bottle of water. I'm having this experience in this trip. How can I feel anything other than grateful? So that's part of that finding God in gratitude, is that it's halfway around the world. It's halfway around the world from all the people I love most. And that being away from home and being out of my comfort zone, it helps me strengthen those parts of myself that I want to continue to blossom, that I always want to cultivate.
I think that's such a great reminder, Christine, because it's like, yes, we can be tranquil and lovely and creative in the comfort of our own home without noise and, the whole thing. But it's like, okay, but can you experience that in India? There's this great book called Living Your Yoga by Judith Lassiter. And she talks about, if you've been able to, one of the 8 limbs of yoga is pratyahara, like withdrawing your senses. And she's like, picture yourself in a busy marketplace. Can you be completely present and still and not be kind of overwhelmed by everything around you? And I just think India with that, right? So it is a wonderful place to practice your stillness and your presence and your gratitude.
Yeah. It absolutely is. That's one of the things I love most about it.
So your photography in here is gorgeous. Did you use just an iPhone, or did you have a special fancy camera?
Just an iPhone.
Amazing, right? iPhoneography.
Yep. I took my iPhone and I took a Polaroid camera. It's the Polaroid camera that takes the little pictures. I took 10 packs of film. And I just took pictures to go away with the Polaroid.
Oh, fun. That's a great idea.
That was so much fun, because I chose not to take Polaroid in 2014, and I so regretted it. And so this year I was like, I'm taking it, and I'm taking a ton of film, and I'm giving them all away. And it was so much fun.
That's a really great idea. I love that.
Yeah, just another kind of exchange,
Now, what would you say you would most want listeners to know about your experience with India? As, before we began recording, we were talking about a recent reading that you had at your home and something that you were surprised about.
So in part of the book, I talk about how people go to India and they either love it or hate it. And, they say they always want to go back or they never want to go back. And the more I thought about that, I was like, I actually don't know anyone who has gone there who did not love it. And so I was thinking like, okay, so where did I get this idea that there's this whole, like that I even know anyone who's gone there and didn't like it? And I think what it is I've talked to more people who are interested in the idea of going to India, but they don't want to because they're afraid. And I actually just talked to someone, I had this exact conversation with someone just last night. And I told her, I said, well, I will put you in touch with this travel agency that I worked with. And she's like, oh, no. We don't work with travel agents. And I just thought, that's interesting. And like, you want to go, but you are afraid for all these reasons. And yet you won't work with this, entity who can help you have an experience there that can still be meaningful and not super like it was not touristy. Like we went to a lot of the popular tourist sites, but anyway, so the thing I would want to say to her and to anyone interested in India is like write down what you are nervous about. Write down what you're afraid of. This is exactly what Barb and I did before we started planning. Like, these are the things we're afraid of. These are the ways I'm crazy. These are the things that are going to make me freak out. These are the things I do and don't want to deal with. And we basically shared that list with our travel agent, not the whole list, but and the travel agent helped us plan an amazing trip that meant I never got sick in my stomach, which was my bigger concern. And we got to do everything we wanted to do. And so I would just say, get clear on what you do and don't want to have to deal with, and what you do and don't want to worry about, and work with someone who can help you accomplish that. Like, just because you've been able to wing it in other parts of the world, you know, of course you could still wing it in India. But if you're having these reservations, then get support.
Well, and you know what's so funny is you something that you said earlier just triggered this for me, and I can't remember what the response is, but you get this all the time, like customer service or whatever. If you're asking for something, it's like no problem, but yet they're not actually fixing the issue. And I can't remember, what is the statement. Do you know what I'm talking about? That is just like the kind of go-to response.
At India?
Yeah.
You mean from people who are afraid to go there?
No, from like if you're asking for something at a restaurant, you know, and yet you didn't get the right thing or something. It's like, no problem. Or it's like, oh, well, we were supposed to leave at 4 and it's like 5:30. It's like, no problem. There's some comment that you always get. And it's just, it always kind of made me giggle. But I can't remember the exact phrase.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's... Did you ever have this? This happened to us so many times that it just cracked us up every time it happened. Like, we would ask a question. The immediate answer would be yes.
Oh,
but
yeah.
But then somehow a few sentences later, they'd say, no, you can't do that. like there was this, seemed to always be this initial desire to say yes to whatever we were wanting, but then eventually we'd figure out, oh no, you can't do that.
Right. Yes means no. Yeah.
It was so funny. But I mean, if they could do it for it, you know, whatever could be done would be done. But it was just funny to have that be so consistent. You know?
Yeah. Maybe it's yes. There was something where we're just like, that is the go-to phrase, you know, no matter what you're asking. Right. Yeah, it's funny. Well, you know, and one thing too, as you talk about kind of the questions or, you know, the concerns that you and Barb came up with in advance, you know, you mentioned one resource, the book, and I've noted that. So listeners, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So are there any others though that you're like, okay, you must read this? I feel like I read a book maybe called Holy Cow.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one.
I think it's an older one. It was very good.
I'll have to write that one down. Yeah, Shantaram is an amazing book. What else? Like, I have some resources in the back of my book. You know, the movie Slumdog Millionaire.
Oh, yeah.
That's a fun one. Exotic. What is it? Marigold Hotel. That one.
Yes.
The best exotic. That's a fun one. There is a book. Let me see if I can find it on my shelf. I'll have to send you the name of the book. A book I read called 9 Lives, which is about these extreme, like, spiritual practitioners in India. And it's written by, I can't remember his name, so I'll send you his name. But he has apparently written a whole bunch of books about India. And my friend Vinita, who's from there, she says his books are always super good and very well researched. And so I'm sorry, I can't think of his name. I don't see his book on my shelf right now, but I'll send you his name.
Yeah, no, perfect. I'll note that and I'll have a link to that. But you're so right about Slumdog Millionaire, which the soundtrack is amazing. And then so
good.
This Marigold Hotel was so good also. So those are great kind of movies to watch to kind of get you in the Indian spirits. Now, in the epilogue, one of the pieces that you wrote that I loved, and, you're kind of talking about like finding spirituality in the mundane. And you say, if I were to rely on grand moments as the only pathways to enlightenment, I'd miss out on all the wisdom that can be found in the everyday minutiae of adulthood. The wag of my dog's tail, you're sweet, doggy, the smell of coffee in my kitchen, a pile of freshly washed towels. Let's speak to that.
Well, it is about those things. I mean, that's one of the first sounds I wake up to is the sound of my chocolate lab, her tail pounding on our bed, and that to me, that's about her joy. It's about her excitement of that there's a new day. We're in our cozy bed together in our warm house and it's cold outside. Freshly washed towels, they're freshly washed. They're clean. We have hot water. We have hot showers, and it's all those things that a lot of people in the world do not have. And so I just never want to take for granted all of these tiny, wonderful experiences that I get to have. The smell of coffee every morning. We have a coffee maker. We can afford to have coffee every morning, like all of those things that they mean something. They represent a certain kind of abundance that I have in my life that I don't ever want to take for granted.
Yeah, such a great reminder, really, kind of boiling down to gratitude and this idea of finding the spiritual in the everyday, not just when we, have the opportunity to go to India or even go to our local synagogue or church. It's like, how do we find it in Tilda's tail wag, right?
Yeah, I did not want to, and I say this in the book, I don't want to give the impression that like, oh, you have to go to India in order to find God. No, of course not. It can be like those moments are available to us everywhere, every day throughout our days. And it's really a matter of paying attention and being fully present in the moment and taking care of whatever has been put in our charge, like our bath towels. I'm going to wash our bath towels every week and I'm going to fold them neatly and I'm going to put them in the linen closet. I want to take care of them. Do you know what I mean? Like I want to take care of what we have, not because like, oh, these objects are so precious. That's not what it's about. But it's about valuing what we have and valuing this home and wanting to keep our home in a certain order because that creates space, it creates openness, it's healthy, it's all those things. It makes it comfortable. It's all, I want it all to flow from the same river.
It's beautiful. I think it's such a profound statement that is a reminder of what you can take away from an experience such as 31 days in India.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And one last piece, Christine, is like for me, the most challenging part of India. For a lot of people, it's like, oh, I just don't think I can see people suffering. It'll be so hard. And, for me, we were mainly in Rishikesh or, Rishikesh. No, is that Yeah, Rishikesh. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay. And where the Beatles went. Rishikesh, right?
Right.
yeah.
Yep.
And it's like Disneyland of yoga. But, the thing for me that was so hard were the street dogs and like heart freaking breaking. And so, one of the things that I did, I spent a lot of my time, getting tea biscuits or dog food and just walking around and feeding the animals. And that was like, that meant so much to me. And listeners, I'll put some links in the show notes about ways to kind of help the animals over there. And also the environment was also kind of shocking of just all the plastic bags and plastic bottles that would just fill up ditches. Mm-hmm. And so, in 2010, that was my first time there. And then what we did is this thing called India Night. And we, did this little bazaar with some things that I'd brought back for sale, like, all those beautiful bracelets and the harem pants and things like that, and the sequin tops. And then donated the money to, I think it was Help Animals Suffering, something like that. And again, I'll put a link in the show notes because I still get updates from them on all the amazing their work they're doing, from elephants to street dogs to donkeys to camels, and then one environmental group. And of course, there's so many wonderful organizations out there kind of working to support the needs of India. And I was just wondering if there was anything that came to mind to you that you kind of really focused on, or that you've kind of brought back and in turn supported with your efforts.
I haven't supported anything specifically since I've been back, but my crazy fantasy is to go back to Delhi and live there for a month and work in this kitchen. There's this huge Sikh temple in Delhi, and they provide 10,000 meals every day to whoever walks in their doors, every single day. And we volunteered there. I mean, volunteer, like we were there for about an hour, but we helped make the roti and, got to participate in their process a little bit. But I would love to go back there and just do that for a month. And I could probably find the website for where you can donate for the meals. It's called the Langar. It's called a free kitchen. And they do everything. Everything is paid for by donations. And we donated when we were there, but I haven't done anything since then. So that's a good reminder, because I love that. I love what they're doing there. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's so many wonderful resources and organizations that are doing so much there. And so, sometimes we go someplace and we're like, oh, I wish I could help this. And okay, we're just there for 31 days or we're just there for a week. And it's like, okay, well, what, how can I take India with me and then somehow give back in some capacity where I feel like I'm making a difference, in just one tiny little way, even if it's just like feeding one street dog a tea biscuit, it feels like somehow there's, a difference being made.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad that you will provide those other links as well. That's great.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share kind of about India, or you're like, oh, we didn't touch on this and I want to make sure our listeners know?
I think I would just want listeners to know that it's a beautiful place. And like I said earlier, if you feel inclined to go and don't not go out of fear. And I can give you the link to a travel agent we worked with if you want. They were amazing. And even if you're not used to working with a travel agent, or for whatever reason you don't like that idea, do it. Like get over yourself.
Yeah, it's highly
because it really is an amazing place to experience.
Yeah, and it's highly recommended, with regard to India, right? Because it's just things don't necessarily run quite the way they do in the US. And so it can be taxing or frustrating or challenging to navigate that system. And so, yeah, it's pretty highly recommended to work with a travel agent.
Yeah. Yep. That would be my advice.
So my last question for you. Oh, wait, there's one other movie I'm thinking of with Adrian Brody. That's another.
Oh, of course. Oh, I can't even believe I forgot it, because I love Wes Anderson, Darjeeling Limited.
Oh, yes. I was like, it has a T name in it. Darjeeling. Yes. So listeners, I'll put a link to all these movies, but these are so freaking good. Yeah. So my last question for you, Christine, is, of course, the name of this podcast is Tranquility du Jour. And I'm curious how you now, right? You're settling in, you've been in Wisconsin now. How long? A year? Plus?
A little over a year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how are you finding tranquility these days in your kind of day-to-day life?
I am finding tranquility in the seasons and in having different kinds of weather and rain. Everyone thinks it's just perfect and heavenly to have sunny weather all year round. But after having it for 22 years, it actually made me oddly depressed. I grew up on the East Coast, so I'm used to seasons, and I was really, really missing that. And so I just love and experience so much of that tranquility when I see the leaves falling off the trees, when it's raining outside, when it's crystally on the ground because of the frost. We got to see all the little tiny leaves open up on the trees. I mean, I haven't seen that in 22 years. All those changes that happen. I can look outside and I know what time of year it is. I love that.
It is a treat to have seasons, isn't it?
It really is. It's been such a gift.
Well, thank you as always, Christine, for being here, and congrats on this new beautiful, beautiful book. And listeners, we will have a link to find it in the show notes. And, I can't recommend it enough. It's a great book and it's a great gift too.
Thank you so much.
Here's what regular retreater Courtney had to say about her Costa Rica experience. This retreat is magical. It's the perfect blend of movement, creativity, and utter relaxation. Kimberly's yoga practice combines asana and breathwork in ways that have left me relaxed and energized at the same time. Even better, the creativity sessions have helped unlock my right side brain, which has been used very little during my legal career, opening up a whole new world to me and giving me the courage to explore my artistic side on my own. In short, the changes I've experienced on my retreats with Kimberly have led to a life-altering adjustment in my career and family relationships. In addition, Pura Vida is a beautiful resort with caring staff and experienced practitioners who offer a wide range of bodywork options. But maybe my favorite retreat activity has been resting in a hammock between classes and treatments, listening to the birds, and catching up on the latest bestseller with a smoothie or a glass of white wine. You can learn more at KimberlyWilson.com/Costa Rica. Savvy sources. You can find Christine online at her website, ChristineMasonMiller.com, on Instagram at SwirlyGirl18, and on Pinterest at SwirlyGirl18. I also have a link to our previous interviews, Transitions, Moving Water, Desire to Inspire, and Ordinary Sparkling Moments. There's also a link to the various things that we mentioned and talked about in this podcast, from the travel agent she used, to books we mentioned, to movies that we found helpful, to the animal rescues that I know of there. And then there's also a link to Year of Tranquility, the New Year's TDJ Live, which was recorded on January 6th, a link to that, and then the Tranquility du Jour app. So, social media, of course, you can find me all over. Mainly Instagram and Facebook are my goes of choice. And of course, same thing with the lovely Christine, finding her on Instagram and Pinterest. Now, there's also a link to shop my seasonless vegan, locally made, eco-friendly fashion collection, Tranquility. I'm currently working on the spring collection, and we'll be announcing the new spring color this week. And you'll be able to follow along with that on the blog, just KimberlyWilson.com/blog. There's also a link to my 6 books, a variety of e-courses, and read a bit more about my passion for animals. So in closing, just a big favor request. If you have a moment to pin a review on iTunes, it helps other people find this show. And I always appreciate hearing from listeners. So if you have a moment, drop me a note, hello@KimberlyWilson.com, and or to pin a review of any of my books on Amazon or Goodreads. Would be so, so grateful. And don't forget those photos using hashtag Year of Tranquility. All right. So thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you are as inspired by Christine as I am, and I wish you a delightful week ahead. Namaste.